Hello, welcome to the second meeting of our special Living One series, Conversations in Community with Nature. My name is Olivia, I'm your host. Conversations in Community with Nature brings together two communities committed to respectful and articulate relationship with all nature's beings to meet in conversation and counsel. Having each in their own way worked in the interstitial space with animals, Deena Metzger and Gay Bradshaw initiate exploration and exchange with others to listen deeply and move human awareness to nature's consciousness. Deena Metzger is a writer, healer, and teacher whose work spans multiple genres, including the novel, poetry, nonfiction, and plays. She is the author of many books, including the novels A Reign of Nightbirds, La Negra y Blanca, Feral, and The Other Hand. Her other books include The Burden of Light, Ruin and Beauty, and Entering the Ghost River, Meditations on the Theory and Practice of Healing. Metzger co-edited Intimate Nature, The Bond Between Women and Animals, which pioneered the radical understanding that animals are highly intelligent and exhibit intent. Her experiences with elephants in the wild over 20 years is based on their spiritual agency and complex narrative communication. Some of that experience is chronicled in her forthcoming novel, La Vieja, A Journal of Fire. She has developed the literature of restoration to, among other goals, advance earth-based writing, restore climate, and counter extinction. Gay Bradshaw is the founder of the Krulos Center for Nonviolence and the Tortoise and Hare Sanctuary. She is the author of Elephants on the Edge, What Animals Teach Us About Humanity, Carnivore Minds, Who These Fearsome Animals Really Are, Talking with Bears, Conversations with Charlie Russell, and co-author of The Evolved Nest, Nature's Way of Raising Children and Creating Connected Communities. And she is the primary carer of all of the resident sanctuary faculty. About halfway through our time together today, we will be opening up this discussion for anyone to share their comments, questions, dreams, and experiences. Also, please note that this Zoom session will be recorded, so if you would feel more comfortable leaving your camera off or changing your Zoom name, please feel free to do so. Finally, we ask that unless you're currently speaking, you keep your microphone muted to avoid any unintended interruptions. So without further ado, we welcome Deena and Gay.
Thank you so much. So glad to see everyone and to enter into this conversation. I was struck yesterday by the title of this meeting, Conversations with Nature. And, you know, we came to that because of the conversations between our two communities. But it's also a conversation between the human community and the animal community at a very strategic time. And so since yesterday, that's been in my mind, that we are here to really inquire about how to have conversations and companionship and interactions and collaboration with nature in these very critical times. So I have been thinking about and writing about artificial intelligence for the last 9 months or so, with increasing alarm. And I think many of us have been watching since March 7th or 8th, an incredible increase in engagement with artificial intelligence and an increasing alarm, not only in those of us who are focused towards the natural world and not towards the mechanical world, but by the very creators of artificial intelligence who are themselves alarmed about where this is going. And there are so many areas that one can look at to be concerned about, But essentially what has happened is that the consciousness that is completely engaged with computation has, in a sense, is taking over the world. Like what you can add up, what you can look at in terms of data is what is being designed to organize our lives so that intelligence is considered data, and algorithms direct you to the data, i.e. the information, but not knowledge and not wisdom, that they want you to understand, so that artificial intelligence, as it's coming in, is also a not subtle form of mind control. And this is not an extreme view. So confronted by that, the next question, of course, is how do we meet it? Excuse me. What is possible? And the only response that I have ever come across that has felt significant and appropriate is that the way to meet it is to ally with the natural world. Now, we've spent a lot of time speaking about protecting animals and not treating them the way we have treated them. And we've begun talking about animal and intelligence and the intelligence of the natural world. But what I'm calling for is our really understanding that the beings of the natural world and the system within which the natural world exists, or the system that it creates, is a form of wisdom. And that what is required, I think, is for us to get out of the minds we have created and that limits us, and open ourselves to the other mind that is there. And the question is, how can we recognize and perceive that intelligence? I was thinking of an event, story I'd like to tell. It feels like a good way to begin, which happened in 2017 when I was in Africa, and I was in Tula Tula. Tula Tula was founded by the man who's considered the elephant whisperer, and Anthony, I need the whole name. Ray?
I don't remember it.
Oh, good. Okay. So it's okay that I lost it.
Anthony Lawrence?
No.
Is that it? No.
Thanks. It'll come in a moment.
His name is Lawrence Anthony.
Thank you. Perfect. So Lawrence Anthony had a small preserve in South Africa, and he received a call from another preserve in the north saying that they had a rogue herd of elephants who were going to be killed because they were leaving the boundaries and they were eating the food of the neighboring farmers who, of course, had taken over their land. It was their land, their food, and that's what they were eating. And now they were going to be shot if Lawrence Anthony didn't take them. And so Anthony had no choice. And he brought this herd down. This herd was not happy to be with them. And he created a boma so they would container so that they would get used to being there as the larger area was being fenced, etc. And they kept getting out of the boma. They kept escaping. They were really not happy. And so what Lawrence Anthony did was he decided that he needed to live at the boma. So he spent a month, maybe more than that, every night, every day, he was right there, bringing them food, talking to them, bringing them food, talking to them. And after a while, Nana, the matriarch, kind of looked at him and said, "Who are you?" Essentially said, "Who are you?" And she put out her trunk to him. And he was a little nervous in that moment, but he understood that she was really trying to understand his motives and who he was. And what's not talked about in those moments is who are these elephants that can look at us, or who are these animals who can look at us and try to perceive accurately our nature and whether we are reliable or not reliable. So I don't think that we have come close to understanding the intelligence of the beings that are around us. And as we try to understand them, we don't understand their ability to perceive what is happening in a situation. So I received an invitation from, it turned out, Nana, over the miles. Suddenly I was absolutely convinced that I had to go to Tula Tula. There's no question in my mind. I had to go to Tula Tula, and I had to meet Nana, and I had to, in our meetings, I was told ways that I needed to address her, that I needed to introduce myself. There was no way I could understand this call except that it literally came from her. And I went to Tula Tula and I spoke to the ranger and I convinced him to allow me and Cynthia Travis and our guide to interact with Nana and the herd in the way that I had been instructed. And all he was willing to do was to take us to a place where we might meet them. And so we went there and we waited, and Nana came with the herd and stopped. And so I said to her, I am so-and-so, and I've received this invitation, and I want you to know my heart. I also said I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not here for personal gain or academic prestige or any of that. And I would like to make myself available to you and your consciousness. And we were then privileged with being with the herd for several days. At this particular time, there was a terrible drought, and water was being imported to Tula Tula and to the area. The animals were without water, and Tula Tula's in a kind of valley, and around them are native indigenous people living. And they had no water. They had been promised water by in the last election by the people who had won, who had asked for their votes. Vote for us, we'll give you water. And of course, they hadn't given them water. And there was a lot of violent protest. It was a very difficult time. And at one point, I was not with Nana, who had sort of was not really very interested in us, but in relationship with Frankie, who was the matriarch in training. So interesting to see these animals. Here is the matriarch. She's not going to live forever. Here is the one who has been chosen. She's not her daughter, but she's the one who's been chosen, has the qualities to be the matriarch, to know everything, to know the land, to know where the water holes are, to know where the food is, to know the climate, to know everything that needs to be known. And to watch this happen in non-humans, extraordinary. So Frankie had taken over. She was communicating with us. And at one point, it seemed like she was really edgy. And the guide had his hand on the ignition saying, I think we ought to go. I don't know, she's really edgy. She sometimes gets this way. It could be dangerous. And I said, can't go till she goes. And I don't think that's what's going on. And then I was eye to eye with Frankie. And she said, do you have any idea what it's like to be designated as a matriarch when you can't lead your people to water, when you are fenced in? And she said, I understand he saved our lives, et cetera, et cetera. But now we don't have water and we're fenced in. And I can't do anything about it. And parenthesis, the reason we don't have water is your fault, you understand, your species. And then she went off. And so we went off. And we started going back to the lodge. And as we went back to the lodge for the first time, Frankie and the other elephants began to follow us. And they were walking completely parallel to the road in a way they had not before. And finally, I turned to the guide and I said, it's kind of interesting. Why are they doing this? Oh, he said, well, it's where the water pipes are. They are following the water pipes. And then he told a story of a time before when there had been also drought conditions, and they had come to a place where the water pipes are particularly high in the ground. It can be easily reached, and they had broken the pipes to get the water. So they followed us down. I went into my cabin. Frankie stood herself in front of my cabin, and she went back and forth with her foot over the water pipe, over the area where the water pipes were. And it was so clear. It so clear the communication that was coming. Water was needed. We had it. It was being imported for us. I could have a drink. She and her people were suffering without it. Something needed to be done. I tell this story because it is for me a complete revelation of unacknowledged animal intelligence. And my response was not fear of what the elephants might do. My response was awe and an understanding that we needed to make some profound connection, recognize what was being said, make a connection, and respond to their situation, which is ultimately what happened. But going back to artificial intelligence.
Deena, can I ask a quick question? Excuse me.
Absolutely.
Why weren't they being given water?
Well, there wasn't any. So
You said there was pipes with.
it being imported, not enough of it. By the next day, there was water. I think what happened when we were there was still some water, then the mud dried, then there was nothing. Well, there had to be something because elephants drink so much water, where your mind is going. But the mud was drying up, and then they did bring it in, and they brought it in for everyone. But it was a major political effort to get the water. When we think about artificial intelligence, we think about an intelligence that has been created from the human mind. That's the way it works. The self-generated large language model is simply the gathering of all our thoughts, or all the thoughts that the coders think should be put into a system to be able to be accessed. And it's not spirit-based, and it's not based in the natural world, and it's not compassionate, and it's not ethical. But I think we will find that if we look at the intelligence in the natural world, we will find those qualities that are absent in this artificial intelligence, which has the capacity, unfortunately, to direct everything that we're doing. And so my ongoing question these days, my ongoing inquiry is, how can we, and then my favorite word, really create, open ourselves to, engage in, have the capacity to understand relationships and the intelligence with the creatures of the natural world, and to say, we have really messed up and our thinking is distorted. Would you consider entering into real dialogue with us? Well, we are not the ones who know. And where intelligence is not, as it has been for so long, imaged as what we do. but that intelligence is actually out there. And do we have the capacity? And how will we do it? How can we enter into this conversation? So that's my question. I don't have any answers for this, but I do have a sense that it is essential to recognize the wisdom that's there and then try to engage with it. So I offer this. I offer this to you, Gay.
You probably know what I'm going to say.
I hope so.
I mean, it's right there. That's the core of what we're doing here at Carrillos is encouraging humans. And I think that's something that we're trying to do is to get rid of they call it conjunctions, the human and nature, if anything, maybe move to human and non-human rather than nature. Because it's artificial. It is the practical thing, which is thousands of years old, if not more. The contemplative practices, basically, the image is draining the brain. Stop thinking. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is in the tradition of Buddhism, Christian, you name it, is to drain the brain. It's as quick. It's not a very picturesque way, but to stop thinking. And as soon as you stop thinking, you move into the present. And the present is where the rest of non-humans live. And I think it's less being in dialogue than that process, which brings us back into the reality. I think, AI is an issue, but I think there's a substrate before that, a precursor, which is even questioning, even using the word intelligence. Because that's a mind thing. So for me, that's the onus is on humans, is to engage in a way that drains their brain and their minds. And that's a tough one because, in the parlance, that's the ego. And it really is rooted in what we've been conditioned into wanting control, wanting to be able to open the door or close the door. Wanting to enclose the elephants or not enclose the elephants. And so that is key. So it's really everyone at the individual level, in my opinion, is to reflect on our privilege. We really cling to our privilege and to really be willing to be vulnerable. And by being vulnerable and by not being in our thoughts, at least that's my experience, is it's just like a freeway of conversation, where I live with all the plants and animals. So to me, that the dialogue is going on, we just don't have the channel on. And I think that that's the first major step. And then it's a matter of letting go of the things that give us privilege and protection and create the interior as well as exterior barriers in that way. So that's what we're calling nature consciousness, with the idea that there's a shared consciousness and reality, and that's a path toward it. And we're drawing on Deeksha and I are working on in particular, but all of us are talking about nature mindfulness. Deeksha is going to be teaching nature mindfulness, and the purpose of nature mindfulness is to understand that we already are in this reality and that there isn't a nature out there to connect with. It's just lowering the drawbridge, if you want to call it that way, the mental, emotional drawbridge, which is also related to, it's fundamentally psychological in that way. So, and again, we're following sort of the precepts of Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Zen teacher, but it's common, and it's also common sense. Is that it's just a matter of letting go, and the quote unquote rules and the wisdom are right there in front of us. So pretty much everything that animals don't have means stuff that we have, and that stuff needs to go if we're really going to be committing to this, to reality in that way. So, I think that's up to every individual, and the door is there. The door is there in that way.
Well,
and I think that it's important to understand that even while we're talking as humans with each other, that there's also dialogue occurring. And so, it's kind of like what Vine Deloria said, we talk, you listen. It's kind of like they talk, we listen.
What I want to say is, and also, I don't want to argue, of course, Buddhism with you. And all I would really say is that.
Well, when I say Buddhism, I'm just
Or
doing that
whatever.
because it's referent. But
I mean,
it's a very common sense thing that cross-cuts any kind of species. And, Charlie, basically, if you can look at him or, whatever label you want to put on, I mean, that's the way Charlie functioned. And that's why, and how he lived with the bears.
that may be. I'm trying to take us to, so we're into and also, because I can be with you with everything you're saying. And also, I'm trying to look at some place where this kind of thinking hasn't taken us. I happen to have the great privilege of knowing Thich Nhat Hanh, and admire him, love him, but it doesn't, for me, solve this or move towards this issue.
Why
And-
not? Why not? What is it about that doesn't seem to be opening the path to you?
Well, first of all, I think it's human-centered, and that we're already there, et cetera, et cetera. I'm interested in our beginning to perceive, forgive me, an intelligence, because that's the word that we're using, a worldview, a way of being that can inform us, can maybe inform us by its startling nature, that will move us into a more profound relationship, or restore us into the original way that we were in the natural world, as a way of meeting a crisis. And so all I want to say is, and also, and I think that we are being called to re-examine the nature or the ways of being of the more than humans, and to see our own limitation in recognizing that way of being. Absolutely everything you're saying, privilege, ego, drain the brain. When you say drain the brain, a big smile on my face. Stop thinking. Stop thinking, stop directing, stop controlling. But something awesome here. Something where the brain capitulates finally to an entangled web of knowing that is perhaps in its recognition sufficient to change our ways of being. So that's and it seems to me that in being open to the nature of the understanding that the non or the more than humans have, that something can shift and that we can relinquish the identity that we have or the connection that we have with what we quote want, all the things we want, all the power we want, all the control we want, all the ways that are the ways we live, the decisions we make. That and it's just a way of knowing, and maybe it's just a way of, I think about that incredible story that you tell, that Charlie tells, where the bears, I forgot the bear's name, or the name that he called her.
Brandy.
Where she chose him as her nana, right? As her babysitter, right? And we think, who is this Charlie Russell person? That's how the story focuses. Who is this incredible person that she would do that? But what I was thinking about yesterday is, who is she? Who is she? What is the nature of this being without any words, without any of the forms that we usually have to determine who someone is, was able to perceive who he was, and he was a most unusual person, right? And also to give him explicit enough instructions. And so,
but the instructions were because of Charlie. I mean, she took the time to befriend him as such, or to mentor him. But the key was Charlie, in the sense of he listened. And I, like I said, he was not in the mind. I mean, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's all, and again, this is my experience, and it's with Charlie. It's just natural, and that's why he talked about, I asked him, I said, are you in love with the bears? And so that's the latter part of the thing. He's, well, I don't know about that. And he goes, yeah, that's true. And it's natural. I mean, this is how I function, but this is definitely Charlie. I mean, Charlie, if you look at the photographs and even the film, which I encourage everyone that, I keep saying that, but The Edge of Eden, and his books, if you look at him in his body, he just sits there, and the one with Biscuit, that's one of the famous pictures, when she's lying on her back, and she was one of the cubs, and she's, a few years old, and they're sitting together by the lake, and they're just being together, and in a sense, it's kind of like with my dad. My dad always wore a crest ring, and we were kind of nonverbal with each other. And at one point, he would put his hand down and it would make a sound on the table, and I'd hold his hand, and we just sat together, and that's a lot of our deeper relationships, I think, is just in what we call silence. And there's so much communication that doesn't even need to be named in any kind of way. So for me, Charlie had the brain drain, and for him, it was, being with the bears was just normal and natural, and being with the trees and, all the other beings. And so, yes, Brandy was, extraordinary. Just like for me, there's a deer I called, Mama, who's now 10. And for some reason, and she's an extraordinary person. For some reason, just like what Charlie used to say about Brandy, she puts up with me. I mean, we have a relationship. And again, like Charlie says, Brandy kind of pitied me, and she kind of pities me because I'm sort of awkward and, everything like that. But we have a very deep relationship. Although I do feel very, very awkward around her because she's so graceful and she's so centered.
And that's the point of it. That is what feels so important here. Not to focus on Charlie, though he was remarkable, et cetera, and we wouldn't know about it if not for him. But who is Brandy?
Well, I think it's important to focus on Charlie because your question was how do we go there? And the point is that the door opened. I mean, Brandy wouldn't have spent 5 minutes with him if he wasn't who he was.
But the point is, what is there? It's fine about how he got there. But what I'm trying to...
Well, I guess the difference between you and me is I look at it as just natural and normal, that it's just extraordinary and life is extraordinary and awesome. And I'll just speak for myself. And when it's not, it's because of me. It's because I get caught up in my thoughts or I get caught up in my issues or whatever it is. I mean, some of them are somewhat meaningful in the sense of I have to take care of the animals who are sick or whatever. But I think that the sort of the assumption, at least that I function on, and I think that Charlie does, is this is extraordinary. I mean, life's extraordinary. It's just like, oh my God, I mean, even in the sense of like how we can do what we're doing right now, that we're breathing and thinking and talking and moving is extraordinary. So I guess I just keep bringing it back that where we need to focus is not in the sense of the privileged egocentric way, but of letting go and opening up that door in terms of our own transformation. So we are able to be with the rest of nature in the way that they are, which is very peaceful. It's nonviolent. It's open. I mean, not everyone wants to sit around, like Charlie said, not every bear liked him. So I guess for me, there's a constant awesome, but the work, at least from my point of view, to be done is what are the steps that we need to take in order to live up to be who they are? That's how I see it.
Okay. And let's say I agree with you, fine. And let's look at, oh my God, let's look at what is.
But that's still, I agree. But I guess the part that maybe is a misunderstanding is that I see a lot of, awareness coming up, but we're in a lot of times, like in the media and it's in a, wow, gosh, and it's an objectification rather than taking it as an assumption. It is an objectification. Is that to me, the assumption that the a priori is anything is extraordinary. And meanwhile, knowing that, how do we become extraordinary in that sense? Maybe I'm saying the same thing that you are, but in a different. That's in the appreciation of, you talked about spiritual agency is, I see all of those things as assumptions and, that those knowing that and acknowledging it, even if we're not necessarily totally cognizant in a way, is just say, that's it. It's extraordinary. This whole thing, this whole planet, this whole cosmos. And then like, how do we become extraordinary?
Yeah.
How can we join the extraordinariness about that?
I guess I'm not interested in our becoming extraordinary.
Well, if we don't become extraordinary, we're not going to have, how do we become allies? You want to become allies. And to become allies, it's this like mutual accompaniment, that term where, we try to, like I'm trying with you, I'm trying to sit with you and share with you and be on your wavelength. You know what I'm trying to say? So that to me is like in our relationships, we try to see the other person and listen to the other person on equal footing. It's not so much reveling in how extraordinary, I'm assuming, what you are, extraordinary yourself.
Well,
anyways, maybe someone would have it. Maybe someone can break the impasse.
Yeah. I think it's just a matter of where we want to put our energy today. I'm interested in putting my energy in the nature of the extraordinary.
Well, how does that move us into describe that as a path for becoming allies and for moving away from the path that our species has taken recently, or the last X thousand years, 100 years,
5,000 years, 10,000 years. When you have a human-centric world, then you have what we have, where everything is measured and considered in what serves us and who we are, that the world is who we are and the rest doesn't matter. That then when one is open to and studies to the extent that we can the extraordinary nature of the more than humans, or even willing to say, oh, the more than humans, what does that mean? And willing to be in awareness and in awe of what it is, that then one would be willing to yield to another intelligence and to long to be reinstated in the world the way it was once, when we were not separated, when culture did not separate us from the ways of the natural world. And so you have at least 5,000, if not more, years of imperial cultures that separated us and distinguished us from humans, from non-humans, and thought that they were in every way lesser. And when that begins to shift by putting one's focus in a different way. So it doesn't diminish Charlie for me to say, let's think about Brandy. It doesn't diminish Charlie to say, let's look at Biscuit. It doesn't diminish anything to say, who is this Frankie person? And it doesn't diminish Thich Nhat Hanh to say, who is this Frankie person? Or who was the ambassador? came. What is the real nature of the world that we're in? I think it's a mystery, the world that we're in. And I think there are events far beyond our understanding, with our brain drained or not drained. And I'm calling us to try to withdraw, and I think we're probably exactly here, brain drain or withdraw from self-concern, absolutely from ego, no question. But to recognize what we haven't been willing to see for so long as a way to get us out of the situation that our thinking for the last 5,000 years has taken us. And that's why I say to you, and also, yes, and also, in that there is a whole tradition for what you're talking about, and teachers and practices. I want to look and also somewhere else. And to recognize that there may be, despite the languaging that makes it difficult to understand it, that there probably are ways of knowing that I have not the capacity to fathom yet, but that if I watch and I extend myself, I might be able to make a connection. And for me, the issue is that it's dire. AI is dire, and it is the absolute antagonism, opposite to the non-human world, the natural world. And so the more we can learn about the natural world, the more we might be weaned from this other way that's taking over. Thank you, Leah, for what you've said. We were having a conversation this morning about the hint of a conversation about salmon. What they know. What do they know? How do they know it? Who are they? Maybe you want to talk about that.
I was going to suggest our friend across the pond, Izzy Clark, is here, and she has some very beautiful poetry that I think would be wonderful to bring in. Izzy, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. Well, I was listening to both of you talking. I was thinking, what would be the most suitable thing? And I think this one now. It's called The Hollow Places. The eyes dark amber, yet moonstruck, half crazed. Pull back, see ears flat, acknowledge the hair. A visionary message unread. Dazed, I reach out, touch wood, and now I can hear. Go, says the oak, into the hollow places. Hair struck, oak struck, blind, the spring lights too bright. Stumbling through thorns, all falls softened by moss and the rich black soil, its promise of night, when scars stay unseen and shades can sheathe us. the secure darkness of the hollow places. Find a form to fit a better being, not bringing to light, but diving in deep. Ideas take root in still small spaces, the moonstruck wood wisdom of hollow places. And just one short one more, and Gay has read an earlier version of this, and Deena, the idea of spirit is quite strong in this one, so I'm hoping that you might like it. It's called Swifts. Sky dancers, wind skaters, scimitar winged, black silhouettes carving air with their speed. Swifts, made of a substance finer than flesh, which too solid earth cannot hold or suppress. My life slows to these stretched moments, time remolded by spiraling flight. Close, so close, whirring wings stir my senses, and the goddess is here, just out of my sight.
And the goddess is here, just out of my sight. Indeed, that is how it is, isn't it? That extraordinary mystery that we give that word to is here, just out of our sight, but is here.
That experience, I was on a meadow, and the swifts were feeding. It was a cloudy day, so they were feeding low down rather than high up. They were feeding low above the meadow, and the stiller I sat, the longer I was there, they were the midges would come around my head, and the swifts were coming around my head, and you'd suddenly see out of your peripheral vision this zoom, and it was I was utterly awestruck, utterly wonderstruck by just their proximity, their presence, their speed, their grace.
Yeah. And something beyond, right, in that.
Yes, by the emergence of a moment, the emergence of something that, and I don't think it's just about a sort of like human consciousness having the ability to sort of like, you know, recognize like that horrible idea that now the universe has the ability to look at itself with the evolution of human intellect, which I just find the most horribly hubristic thing in the world. But just the and I guess it's that sense of they knew I was there. They knew I was a living being, and a potentially threatening living being. And they were as aware of me, more aware of me in their speed and in their hunting strategies, even than I was of them. And so we were in this shared moment of acknowledgement of each other. And whatever that means, I don't know, but it's a moment of just being shared between and in between emergence. And that's what that sense of the goddess feels like for me, whether it's being with a tree or the bees or the robin in my garden. It's that feeling of you're in the sentience of some other person who is just as open to you in all their differences as you are to them. And what do I look like to a bee? How do I appear? How is my presence felt to a tree? I am transmuted into alien, and the togetherness is like the placenta between us, where the two different beings are both separated and created by our presence with each other.
You know, I had an experience like what you're describing very recently, where for a moment, but long enough, I saw the world. I saw the human species through the other species' eyes. and in the way that you're talking about, we're seen as alien and potentially dangerous. I saw what it was like to live with the constant presence of this violent species. It was like to be always in that consciousness.
Could you describe what the moment was, or?
You know, it was, yeah, I can. I don't know if this will work, but you know, this is what it was. I had COVID. And so it was very recently. And I was thinking of everything I had thought about COVID before I had COVID, particularly in the beginning, when many of us began to think that COVID was a means to get us to stop doing all the things that we were doing because of the transformation that occurred when we weren't driving and we weren't out and we weren't flying and we weren't. And so here was COVID in my body. And I literally said, okay, who are you? And I thought, you know, so you want to stop, even though I'm your friend, right? We're in the same, we're engaged in the same thing. You're stopping.
You're the host.
I'm the host. What do you want? What do you want me to know? And that took me to just being outside, and the trees here know that I'm not going to cut them down. But everything out there is dependent on what I want, I, human, want and do. And suddenly I was in that consciousness. So anguishing, incredibly anguishing. And at the same time, Topanga is more beautiful than it has ever been because of the rains. Everything is full, fertile, flowering, and just amazing. So these two things of this effulgence and also the awareness of how incredibly painful it is to live in the presence of the human species. And that's what you were saying, Isabel, moved me so much. You know, the astonishing generosity of the display that we are allowed in the presence, despite who we are.
It is being given a gift of grace, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, isn't it? And so I want to learn to walk in the world so that one would not fear me, that I would be part of the community in the ways that all the others are part of that community. You know, we had this conversation the other day where I was describing being in Africa, and I was with a huge herd of antelopes, And then suddenly, a lion, young male lion, starts walking through. But he's not hungry. And there is no fear. They just continue, the little ones, the big ones, the broken ones, the beautiful ones, they continue what they're doing. And there's no fear. There is a way of understanding and expecting how everyone is going to behave with everyone else. That net of Indra is comprehensible, and we're outside of it because we violated all of it. And I think if we saw what was there and saw really that it is beyond us, that it might change us because we want to be part of it again. I think it would be the longing to be part of it, to understand what's there and to be part of it, to integrate oneself into it, might be a way that things might begin to turn around. And every other possible way that it can turn around is invited and honored, every possible way. So,
Izzy, I was thinking that the oak story, it seemed, maybe I'm misremembering, but it seemed very much what Deena was kind of describing with the elephants. Am I misremembering?
It has a sort of a connection to it. It's more about, to some extent, the stories we tell. But I can certainly read that one if you would like.
I just rang a bell with, what Deena, what we opened with the elephants.
So it starts, there's a quotation from I had a message from a tree, which sounds strange, that said, go to the hollow places. And I searched out a book. I searched out, books, and I found a book called Hollow Places, which actually was not wholly relevant, but it had this wonderful quotation. We will eventually forget our stories if we don't renew our capacity for wonder. Walter Benjamin has written that we are now much more interested in information than in wisdom, and information must be plausible, whereas wisdom from afar often employed the miraculous. So that is entirely on point, and this story is related to that. Once upon a time, an oak tree that had long, long ago been an acorn and was now growing down in the late stages of nearly a millennium of life, decided it was time to pass on his wisdom. His trunk was as hollow as an old snail's shell and big enough to squeeze in representatives from many of the woodland families. Aurochs, bear and elk, wolf and deer, fox and hare, lynx and rabbit, pine marten, stoat and rat, weasel and mouse, badger, squirrel, vole, frog, toad, owl, goshawk, raven, rook, crow, jackdaw, jay, magpie, pigeon, blackbird, robin, wren, and all the other little birds that sing the woodland symphony. Not forgetting the worms and beetles, flies and bees, wasps and millipedes, moths and butterflies, slugs and snails, and all the rest. The fungi, algae, lichen, moss, plants and flowers and trees leaned in to listen. It was crowded, but these creatures knew how to be together. Welcome, began the oak, and everyone barked and called and sang and croaked and squealed their appreciation. It took quite a time for them to calm down, but the oak was patient. He knew the value of patience. The future is upon us, he said, and the past still takes its toll. Some of us are extinct. The aurochs lowered his heavy head. and some of us are extinct here. Now he saw the elk send his tongue up a nostril, while the wolf lay down, ears flat, her eyes blinking slowly. The lynx was washing their paw and didn't seem to be listening. The pine marten chittered, I know some of you are making a comeback. That's something to celebrate. The rabbit, rat, squirrel, and mouse didn't seem entirely convinced, but kept their peace. Many of us are under greater threat now than ever before. Through his roots, he felt the weight of his fellow oaks, the grief of the ash trees, the fear of the horse chestnuts, and the ongoing lament of the elms, the rare tremors of spindle, small-leaved lime, black poplar, and wayfaring tree. It was hard not to be arborocentric at times like this. As he paused, considering how to go on, how to tell all the wood's wildings to hold strong, to remember that their community was their defence in dark days, the crow flapped his wings. Some of us are doing just fine, said the blue-black winged bird in his rough-edged mezzo. The fox, who'd left her 4 lively cubs with her mate, added, the people leave scraps. They kill us less. Agitated, the hedgehog rattled her prickles. Her voice mingled the huff and the squeak. She said, apart from the roads. At this, everyone started up again, the 4-legged ones and some of the winged ones. The oak waited, patient as ever. He did not have all the time in the world, but he had more than many of these others. In the quiet, when it came, the bee buzzed, and the oak heard. Yes, the roads are bad, the chemicals too. Now the sound was all in the underground and in the high zone. The plants and the insects knew the agonies of soil and air that couldn't be trusted, of pollen that killed and water that poisoned. The birds added their chorus for the lack of creatures to eat, the loss of morsels to feed fledglings, and the hunger of those that survived. The oak felt the damages of time when the pain of his community hit him. That proud crown, now broken off and shattered, that once housed and fed so many. Those lost branches with their holes and nesting sites. Even when leafless, his dead stag's head was the favoured perch for generations of raptors. He thought of all those acornlings perished by drought and disease. He grieved for a land that promised so much, and now seemed capable of giving so little to the wildlings and the woodlings, the free and the feral. His great wisdom waned in the face of such adversity. The strength of community, a community that seemed to count for so little among those whose world-shaping power decided their fate. In all his long life, he had seen much, and these days little surprised him. But what came next surely did. The hare sat up. She had been crouched like a basilisk. White, like paired sickle moons, gleamed at the edges of her eyes, slivers of light in the dim centre of this hollow place. She said, it was bad enough to be food, vermin, and trophy, but it's now just as bad, perhaps yet more damning for us. We are numbers, not stories. We are data, not deities. We reside in their science instead of their imagination. That is our tragedy. Then, said the oak, in the sudden silence, with the spirit of ages rumbling up from his roots, we must seed ourselves back into their wonder-starved souls.
Well, that's it, isn't it? We must seed ourselves back into their wonder-starved souls. Yeah. And the thing is that every one of those animals that was there had that light in the eye, had that, we refer to them, we're used to referring to them in one way or another that really kind of diminishes them, but it's quick, the way the humans see them. But when you get to the end, then the being is there in the being's nature, and And it is I love that, wonder starved. Absolutely. Yeah.
That also speaks to the antidote to what you started off with AI is story. Story is an antidote. The information.
Imagination is the antidote, right? Deep story. Imagination. The place where the particular human way of seeing things doesn't dominate, and how to step. I think what I'm doing, I'm trying to call us out of human mind into what is so extraordinary about the natural world is the persistence of the particular in the oneness. You know, the necessity to understand the very original particular ways of being that are part of one system and also so very, very individual. And that the imagination is beyond us. AI is the epitome of the limitation of all our limitations are gathered in one place of power. And that which is beyond us is not there. The thing about AI is that it is not original in any way. By its nature, it's not original. And how to create a counter force, how to enhance a world that is different from that so that we can survive, so that the natural world survives. These are essential questions. We have just a few more minutes. I'm wondering if anyone else wants to come into this conversation.
Yeah, I would like to say something. Izzy, all your poems are beautiful, so thank you for sharing that. The last one that you read, the one line that struck me profoundly was the line of many of us are under threat in a way we've never known before. And I think that applies to humans. That's our warning, right? That unless we understand something, unless we come to a way of knowing, unless we come to the humility and grace that's being spoken of, that is what's happening to us, right? And so I see that as, hey, we need to wake up, right? And I'm kind of to follow some of these, threads. Deena, when you were talking about the elephants, one of the things that struck me is the Sheltered Wildlife Trust, and Daphne was so ahead of her time and of another world, quite frankly. But to the whole point about that, the elephants decide who works there. The humans do not. You get a month to be around the animals and they determine who is going to work with us. And there's this beautiful picture, they're among hundreds of powerful beings, right? And they don't carry bull hooks. They're orphans, and they're the wild, beings that are there. And there's this beautiful picture of this gentleman who works there talking to this beautiful, massive bull elephant. And it's common language, it's shared space, it's this level of understanding.
Right.
And to the thing about AI, the natural world is a world we'll never understand. There's sounds we will never hear. There's colors we will never see. There's smells we don't understand. Like, we can't even begin to manufacture, create, or whatever, you know, and we use AI to give us a better understanding of it, and yet it's a place we can never go. And so all we can do is accept that. And to me, that's the grace, the sacredness, that's the humility in this. But it's also about returning as the individual, right? And I guess this goes back to Izzy, your warning. You know, it's also about returning to that place in your soul. And I'll speak in my soul, right? When I was put on this earth, whatever you believe, I came with everything I needed to know. I came with that wonder. I came with that grace. I came with that connection to spirit. And minute by minute, day by day, life by life, I lost something in that. And so that's, to me, the reconnection, right? It's that returning to self. The natural world always lives in itself. It always knows its boundaries. It knows its strengths. It knows its weaknesses. It always knows how it operates and how it operates together. Right. And it understands it's not an I, it's not a power, it's inclusion in its entirety. And so anyway, good conversation. I think that there's a lot of wisdom and there's a lot to take away and really kind of ponder and think about. But I think, you know, Gay and Deena, it's both of your thoughts, right? I don't think it's the either or, the and also, right? It's all of these are pieces in how we get there, you know, but to me, it's the humility of the natural world is my church. It's my sacred space. I will never be as graceful and as the natural world will be. But I agree, Deena, it's like, what a privilege to be allowed into it and to enter it in the ways that we are always allowed to be in it. And those relationships are sacred. And I'm here in service to them. I think that that's the way I'll end it is I understand I'm here in service to that and to that relationship and that knowledge and that understanding. So thank you, everybody, for the comments.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jenny.
Jenny.
Hi, guys. Can I say something? Hi, Deena.
Gay.
Hi,
Hey,
Gay. I was reading an article that I've saved. It was in Time Magazine by an author named Martha Nussbaum. And she has a theory, it's called the capabilities approach to us and to animals, where our biggest mistake was comparing animals to us. You know, their thoughts, their beliefs, like, oh, this elephant looked in the mirror and he recognized himself, or this dolphin did. Who cares? We can't even talk like they can teach. And when you're around them and you start listening to them, we've just made that mistake. We wrote the book and we wrote a bad book. And I'm not going to get into religion because I have issues with that. You know, as a former altar boy, all right, we don't want that. And when you get around people that can really talk to them, and when you allow us, if we can, not everybody can do it, but if you're opening up those portals and hear them talk, they are our teachers. They're us, you know, and they're matriarchal. And we did something wrong somewhere along the line. We compare. She believes that every animal, including us, because we're animals, we are born with inherent capabilities to survive, to breathe, to live, and to grow, and to nurture. And what we've done is we changed all that because we're comparing everyone else out there to us. Oh, isn't that great? Lily could talk to dolphins. Okay, big deal. So can a lot of other people. And Charlie he could talk to the bears. I was given a gift to work with elephants and be with somebody who could talk to them. And we're just not following that rule. And I don't know why. Do you guys know? I mean, you guys been doing this a lot longer than I ever did it. I just was given a gift to be able to work with them. But through both of you guys, with Gay, you know, I've known Gay a long time, and Deena, she bumped into me at the Element Conference. You still wouldn't trade me your necklace for my Hopi bracelet. We'll get to that later. Okay. And I tried, and I'll see you eventually because I'll be coming out to Cali in the next few months sometime. Do you guys see that? I mean, you guys lecture, is it even at the
Yeah.
elephant conference.
I
Everybody
think,
has their opinions. Everybody has their opinions. Is there one answer? Is it a multitude of answers like spokes on a wheel?
well, I think there's, of course, a multitude of answers, and we can just go the natural world for its complexity and see that as a model. But human thought has privileged itself, and almost every system is hierarchical with the human beings at the top, and every definition of intelligence has had to do with comparing our way of thinking to everyone else, and if no, we're the pinnacle in every cultural thought system, and that's a problem. Exactly as Martha Nussbaum points out, and as you point out. So to me, the answer is, can we then see the others? If we really see the more than humans, then we understand that we are not superior. And then that thinking begins to devolve. As there must be other ways. Obviously, there are other ways of doing that as well. But for me, at this moment, it feels aesthetically correct to focus on truly seeing the non-humans and not being so concerned with myself.
Do you think it's ego? Something stands in the way of us accepting that, you know what, we're wrong.
Yeah.
Why is that so hard to admit? I mean, not everybody can do it. Listen, I grew up in the south side of Chicago. It's hard for people to say, I'm wrong. I'm just wrong. What you're saying is true. Why is that so hard for us? Do you know?
Well, it's the same thing. We're superior.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone, this is a very common concern, and a very common thought. But, Ray, you had an experience where you had to learn you were wrong.
Yeah.
And so
That was hard to accept. That was hard to accept.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you got the bullhook in one hand and they're bowing in front of you, and that to move on beyond that power, that was really hard to do. It gives you a sense of superiority. Even though it's lacking, you still feel that way. That's a big, powerful thing to walk around 4-ton animals and say boo, and they jump. And it was hard to accept that, and we did. And I'm glad I went through it.
And that moment, that's a source of wisdom for us. It may not be the only way, but for you to begin to understand what was possible in that moment is very important. That's a wisdom you carry.
It's extremely hard to describe that because it happened so. First of all, my story, what we did with the Ellies. It happened so quickly, and it had been waiting for so long to come out. Does that make sense? Yeah. They were just waiting to tell us. You could just look in their eyes after we went through that, and they looked at us going, all right, why'd you wait so long? We've been trying to talk to you, and you wouldn't listen. And that was really cool. I have to admit, it was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You couldn't listen because you didn't understand.
I didn't want to listen.
Yeah.
And until it got to the point where somebody else had to come. Samantha Curry came in and she opened up all of her eyes. And it was that simple. We were trained in a certain way. We were robots. Here's what you do. Here's how it's always been. And then when someone said, you can turn right instead of turning left. And we did. And it just opened up all these doors. And it was so cool to be around that environment. I'm never going to replicate it again. But at that period of time, it was so cool. It was just so cool.
Yeah. So now an entire species has to say, we were so wrong.
Yeah.
Everything was wrong. Our theologies are wrong. Our cultures are wrong. All of it are wrong. All our ideas, our favorite ideas, they're all wrong.
Why do you think that happened? there had to be a point in time where we stopped being listening to the ancestors and decided to take over. Something happened. You know what? I don't know. Do you know? Was it always meant to be?
Oh, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I don't think so either.
I don't know. You know, there are all those theories. Isabella is saying agriculture, the way women are treated, fear, circumstances leading to fear, all our Bibles, one after another.
Well, they're all patriarchal.
That's right. And violent and hierarchical.
Yeah.
All hierarchical. And indigenous people are not. You know, quite different. Very, very different way of being in the world. And maybe that's what draws me so much to saying, let's know what the natural world is, because the Native American thought, for the most part, the range of thought in Native American thinking is enormous. And the connection with the natural world, the intelligent connection, is profound. And
what caught me off guard is I have very, very, very good friends that live on First Mesa Hopi out in Walpi, and getting to know that culture. And I'm going way back to the 80s, okay, when I first met these friends of mine, and knowing that all of property goes through the matriarchal side of the family. Men don't own the land. All the women did. It was so interesting being around them. It was really kind of cool, and to cook with them and to hang out with them. And what a different approach. And they've been doing that for a lot longer than we have, you know, thousands and thousands of years. And to listen to the stories that get passed down. And it was, but it's not based on dominance, control, you know, and they tell stories, you know, about the conquistadors coming to looking for the cities of gold and not knowing in Hopi language, gold is corn. It had nothing to do with gold. Like we go to, you know, we mine gold. It was corn. It was gold. And then when they found that out, they took off because they didn't want the corn. But so to hear those stories from a different point of view than the way we were all raised.
also to put yourself in that mind and to watch the colonists, the colonial people come with their guns, with their,
And there's smallpox.
oh my God. I mean,
Yeah.
so for me, the task is to put oneself in the mind of the other with great respect and let that knowing undo us. That's one way, just one way that I'm offering.
Hey, say hi to Cynthia for me, okay? When you see her next time. All right, I'm not going to take up too much of your time. We can sit and talk for hours, which we will when I get out there. All right. One day we're going to sit for hours and talk. All right. Thanks for your voice and your honesty and your passion, and with Gay too. And you guys are my friends. Thank you very much. I'm honored.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Ray. Yeah. Maybe this is it. Maybe
I can squeeze a little more out. Maybe you can read some of your poetry.
who are you talking to?
Anyone. I was talking to you, but anyone. It's so rare to have this, you know, sort of lovely time. That's why I don't want to end it right now, but we can, but it's just a lovely time just to be together.
Well, I will I'll go now to my.
Oh, Annie, there's a Annie, did anyone have a question? Excuse me, Deena.
Yes,
Sure.
I did. I had my hand up, but if you guys want to keep going.
No. Hey, Annie, nice to meet you in visual.
Hi. Hi, Gay. And I was just in this whole conversation, and thanks, Izzy, for seeing my hand. I was thinking of this conversation that Deena was having with a group of people who are writing about the natural world in a specific way, and they were talking about the communications that they were receiving from the beings that they were writing about. And one woman, her name is Nan Seymour, she's done a lot of work with the Great Salt Lake. She made this amazing differentiation, and she said, the lake didn't call out to me personally, it just called out, and I was the one who heard it and listened and changed my life. And I think that that's such an important, I don't hear animal communicators talking like that. I hear a lot of animal communicators saying, the animal reached out to me, I'm special, I'm extraordinary because this animal's talking to me. And I'm not sure that that approach leads to the thinking that we're all trying to get to. Of course, even the language that we use around it is a failure, like oneself. The word one is separate, self is separate. In and of itself, it doesn't work. But I don't think animal communicators are extraordinary. I think they're regular people who've changed their minds and they've opened their hearts to a call, to a station. They tuned their bodies to a station that has been there for thousands of years. And then the station went into the music went into their hearts and minds. And Deena, you said it's about getting to a point where we can listen. And I wonder if you could say more about that path, because to me, it's not about the outcome of being a special person who's able to hear. It's about changing my life.
You know, when
Thank you, Annie.
when the call from the thank you for bringing in Nan, whose work in responding to the call is beyond extraordinary.
She joined us last time, I think, didn't she? Yeah.
Yes, you did, Gay. That's right.
When the call from the ambassador came, I did not believe that it came to me. I absolutely believed exactly what Nan said, what she felt about the lake, that there was a call that went out in the world, and I happened to hear it. How do we become someone who can hear it? Something in us has to be calling to be in right relationship with the world. Maybe it was my ongoing anguish for the world. Maybe it was, as an 8-year-old learning about the atom bomb and saying no. Who knows why that was my concern since I have no idea. But I do believe trying to really recognize, honor, be in awe of the other is what's essential. And You know, there are cultures that don't have egos like we have. I think we have to examine our culture. We have to examine our documents. We have to examine our footnotes, who we quote, who we look at. Really, and I'm thinking of Isabella said as she introduced the second time you spoke, you said, I got a message from a tree. How something like that's
Yeah, how strange. She said, isn't it strange? And I was like, no.
Stop. I wanted to stop you right then and there and say no. Because the implication is that a tree couldn't, as opposed to the implication is that we are not listening. Because if we recognize that the tree is a creature that can and does, then we're in another world. So it's always, for me, these days, it's always seeing and honoring the other and humbling myself. How fortunate. I got a message from the oak. How fortunate that I could hear it. How grateful I am that I could hear it. So we start listening differently. We start acting differently. Yeah.
Thank you, Deena and Gay. Thank you.
I don't know why I want to read this, but as I was preparing this morning, I looked at Intimate Nature again. This book came out in 1998. Intimate Nature, the bond between women and animals, one piece after another about the relationship, about who animals are. It's amazing. And we didn't know when we put it together that we would end up with a document which confirmed what was not talked about, animal agency. Not only animal intelligence, but animal agency. And of course, it was collaborative. That's why it was possible. So Linda Hogan, who's one of the co-editors, myself and Brenda Peterson, wrote an essay which she calls First People. And she speaks about, in the essay, she speaks about returning an eagle to the wild. And then, well, let me read this final paragraph. This paragraph. Finally, finding the right place, we pull over and take him out of the carrier. With grief and joy mixed together in our hearts, we say goodbye and set him free, placing him on the ground. He looks around for only a moment, and then in a muscular rise, his long wings open, strong and wide, he pulls upward. The bird doesn't stop in a tree to wait and watch. He flies, the light on him gold and brown. His dark eyes watch us. He circles back one last time, the way so many birds do, as if to say goodbye. And then he travels away until he is only a spot in the sky. And soon he disappears altogether from our sight, although with his keener vision, we know that he still sees us where we stand on the autumn earth, wondering, as I will always wonder, what was communicated by the bird to us, how it was spoken, how taken in. And then she follows this with a poem called Magic Words, Eskimo. In the very earliest time, when both people and animals lived on Earth, a person could become an animal if he wanted to, and an animal could become a human being. Sometimes they were people and sometimes animals, and there was no difference. All spoke the same language. That was the time when words were like magic. The human mind had mysterious powers. A word spoken by chance might have strange consequences. It would suddenly come alive. And what people wanted to happen could happen. All you had to do was say it. Nobody could explain this. That's the way it was. So, in calling us to know the non-human beings, it's not a new thought. That's the way it was. And can we return to those ways by which we would have to recognize that our Western intelligence is not intelligence, and that Western culture is, as Ray said, wrong. He didn't say Western culture was wrong, but he said we got to see what was wrong. I said, Western culture, we're wrong. We're wrong. The way it was, let us see if we can return to those ways. I can end with the one poem of mine I remember because it's very short. And most of you probably know it. There are those who are trying to set fire to the world. We are in danger. There is time only to work slowly. There is no time not to love. May all the possible ways that we will find to meet these times be full of light and life. May they do their work. May we find our ways. And it is, these are sacred paths we're talking about. All of them. So, great pleasure to be here with you. Well, thank you, Gay.
Thank you, Deena. Thank you, everyone. That was wonderful. Do we need every minute?
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful to be here with all of you. Our next meeting of Conversations in Community with Nature will be on September 20th at the same time, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific time. we hope you'll join us again then. It was wonderful to be here with all of you today. So thank you for sharing your time with us and all of your wisdom and insight, Gay and Deena and everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Izzy, Jenny, Annie, and those who didn't speak. Thank you. It's lovely.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye, Olivia.